Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Kim Barrett Show. I am your host, Kim Barrett, and on today's episode, we are joined by James and Jara from Logos. Now, if you've ever wanted to understand your personality type, really dive deep on what makes you tick, what are your areas of genius, how do you actually interact with other people, and not really just be confined to a box being like, you're this type of person, you're that type of person, but actually understand like what it is that's involved in your full personality. This is the episode for you, and you are not going to want to miss it. And of course, if we can ever help your marketing grow, not just understanding your personality, but understanding your business growth, then we've got you covered. Head over to marketingmogul.com.au for all your marketing needs. But until then, let's jump into the show. Jara and James, thank you guys so much for joining us. Really appreciate you making the time.
So excited to be here.
Great to have you guys. Now, I always like to start the podcast off the same way every time, which is if I met you guys at a party and I came up and we were chatting and I said, what is it that you actually do? What's your go-to answer?
So here's how I would answer that. We help people get brutally honest with who they truly are, so that they can actually make the best decisions.
I like it. How would you answer that one, Jara?
Yeah, I think mine is slightly different. You can say, what do I actually do? I go a little more extreme. Like I've co-created the world's most precise personality assessment, which helps you get to where you want to go faster and with more ease.
I got to say, I'm sorry, James. I kind of like Jara's better. I think I would spend more time talking to her after at the party. But so tell me a bit about that, guys. Like, obviously, for someone hearing that, and obviously, there's plenty of different personality tests and things like that then coming along. Like, what got you guys to the place where you went, actually, you know what? We want to create something that's even better than the ones that are already existing. Like, what kind of led you to that point of creating that?
Yeah, so we looked at all the things that are out there, and we always felt like it was capturing a very small percentage of human potential. Like we wanted a test that would say more about somebody than just how they communicate or whether they're an introvert or an extrovert. We wanted something that was going to reveal where someone's genius was, no matter whether it was with people, no matter whether it was with being a masterful, just incredible worker who just like cranks out and is incredibly productive, or whether it was someone who relies on their intuition and has a gift for that. Like we wanted to be able to capture that, because I think for so many of us, like we got labeled maybe in school as like, you're either this or you're that. You're a smart kid or you're not a smart kid. You're an athlete or you're not. And there's so many dimensions to human potential. So like I've always been fascinated with like, how do you measure it? How do you see it? And then how do you share it with people?
Yeah. And I think in my experience, because of working with just so many different teams and stuff and coming in and having them take multiple tests to get that complete picture and see like what makes you tick, what's your genius, and how can I support in stepping into that? And there was nothing really complete. And so it just felt like there was this huge kind of gap in that area.
So what was it for you guys? Like, what was the specific thing? Because obviously, like you mentioned being in teams and working with teams, was it that you just went, hey, yeah, there is kind of something completely wrong with this, or you got to report on yourself, and you were like, this isn't me. Like, what was the kind of like the tipping point that led to you guys really kind of understanding that there was something missing?
So
I wonder if the answer will be the same. You go first.
Okay. So I think for me, when we really got serious about creating this was when we had a lot of conversations about, we want to create a society of leaders who are changing the world. But if we want to create that society, we'd have to identify who the leaders are in each category and how do their character work so that we can help them integrate together. And essentially we were like looking at like, if we're building the Justice League or the X-Men, what's a personality test that can actually identify the powers of each of those respective characters more accurately than just being like, okay, here's your type of one of 9 types. I think that was for me the moment when the idea got more inspired and we started to get into action. What about you, Jara?
No, that was exactly it. Because it is indeed like, here's you of one of, 16 types or 9 types, or depending on which 4, sometimes even. And it's like, well, if there's 7 billion people on the planet and there's only 9 types, like, how is that really showing your uniqueness and your power? And James had been working with this for a while and created like a list of questions. We just kind of went through that, and it's like, oh, does that really show it? I don't know. And we just kind of played with it for a bit, and then it became a serious of like, oh, what if we can create something that shows with pinpoint precision what someone's power is as a leader and as a soul here on earth?
And so what was everything else kind of missing? Like, what were some of the things you guys identified where you were like, look, this is only, it only goes so far?
Yeah. So most personality tests, they tell you who you are right now, but they don't give you a roadmap for change. So they basically say, you're an ENFJ and this is who you're going to be for the rest of your life. Like, here are your tendencies. Good luck. Hope it works out for you. And I come from a personal development and coaching background where we help people change things about themselves and transform areas of their life that aren't working. And I know that human beings transform and can transform. So we wanted, like, the current tests basically put you in a box. You're designed to stay there, and they're actually designed to keep you there. So that basically there's designed for stability, meaning that if someone changes their answers as they evolve and grow, the test is considered not valid. But actually, in many cases, that's the evidence of people's evolution. That's the evidence of their growth and the transformation they're happening. So that's a huge thing. Is one of the gaps.
Was there anything else, Jara, that you kind of saw that as you were going through them?
I think those are definitely the main ones. We're humans, like, we're created to evolve. That's how we've survived up until now. And so tests not tracking that is a huge shortage. And yeah, I think James covered most of it. Most of the big ones that were motivators.
Yeah. The other thing is like the lack of specificity. So we already kind of talked about it, but literally there are billions of potential outcomes to the test. So every answer you get is going to be very specific to you. It's very unlikely that any other human on earth is going to have the same unique cluster of traits and blind spots. And so in that way, you're a very, very unique profile. So that's another aspect where it's just a lot more specific.
So putting on, because I'm like a bit of a nerd, so I would like to ask this question. What's the tech like behind that then? Like, building that out to be able to generate something like that? Like, is that custom? Is it looks like it might be a bit of a headache from Jara's perspective from that reaction? Like,
it's what's that the like? Amount of hours spent putting in like the formulas and the custom codes and there's a lot of time that goes into that, because you also can't, a lot of time and so many hours and hours of testing, because not one of those formulas can be wrong. So yeah,
it was a beast from a technical standpoint to execute. We have a software platform with some custom coding on it, on top of it, that allowed us to pull it off in a relatively short time with a relatively lean budget. But so far, so good. Ultimately, we're working towards a whole robust platform. But right now, it's up, it's live, it's running. Yeah, it's there.
It's beautiful. It's a beast, but it's beautiful.
Awesome. I love that. And then, so what are some of the outcomes that you guys have seen from people once, obviously, being previously put into those boxes and containers, being like, hey, you're this, you're that, then coming through and working with what you guys are doing? Like, what are some of the outcomes you guys have seen from people that have gone through it and then kind of started to understand themselves more?
Yeah, we've had people because every test comes with a session, and that's when you get your results, and we really dive in and we ask, like, what are your aspirations? And we can read it according to that. But when we get to the top 7 and how they play together and like how that's your power, we've had people break down into tears because they're like, that is it. And I've just never understood myself, or I've never had someone I've never been able to know how to explain it, or it's like this validation that comes through some of them. So there's that. And then after that, we see that they like own it, and they're like, this is what I do. And and so it's just beautiful to see the ownership there. And then with there's like it's relatively simple. There's like 2 or 3 areas of focus that will make huge change. And so when people actually follow through, we check up afterwards, and we've had some crazy stories of 180s that have happened. Sometimes 90-degree turns where it's just a whole other direction. They're like, this is what I'm doing now. And it's just like, oh, that's great.
Yeah, usually anytime we see people actually implement the feedback, because the power of Logos is not just that it's amazing test, it's what you do with it. So we give 3 to 5 strategic recommendations for every person who takes the test, so that it's basically saying, here's what you want to create. Let's say if it's business success, we identify, here's what's stopping you in this area. Here's the type of person you need to attract to work with on this project based on the things that you hate to do and that you're not good at. Here's like strategically how you should leverage the thing that you're amazing at. And basically it's just whether or not people implement the feedback, because when they do, like Jara's saying, we get crazy testimonials of people who come back and have started a new business and it's getting traction really quickly without much effort because they're doing the thing that's actually their genius and not doing a bunch of other stuff. And then we also see stories of like people who have left situations that were bad for them. They've realized some profound blind spot that was in their way in a relationship. They have started to open up to somebody more. They've started to change the way they handle something. So there's a lot of like life transformation that happens in subtle ways for people who take that feedback and run with it. Right now, what we're working on is just how do we inspire every single person to actually execute the feedback.
Now, being that you guys didn't have the test before you started working together, does the test show that you two should be working together now after building the tech? I'm very curious.
Great question.
That's a great question. Yeah. James had hired me to work in one of his other companies. So we had experience working together and it was like, oh, this does work. And then after we took the test, there's a good amount of overlap and there where I have some serious gaps. He's super strong and vice versa. So it was actually like, oh, this is why this works so well.
Yeah, I would say the fit is pretty strong. I'd say there's, when it comes to like, there's certain traits we call like responsibility and systematic, in which one has to like really stay inside of rigid systems and execute repeatably. Neither of us are very strong in those areas. So we're like leaning on other people to help us with that. But other than that, we are, it's a good fit after taking the test for sure.
Beautiful. Awesome. I just thought, because it's always funny, like when people build things like that and it's like, oh, well now, like with hindsight, would the original decision have been made be the same one? And it was good to hear that that's the case for you guys. Yeah. And so being that you've got things up and running, things are rolling, like what's coming next? What's the next few moves for you guys?
Yeah. So we're now in the process of building out enough sample data to be able to come up with really powerful conclusions for the world. Because I don't think, like, we're measuring thousands of variables for each individual who takes the test. And then we're mapping and creating a database of how that looks. So we can start to say things like, the people who earn the highest income have these traits in common. The people who have the most connected social networks to them have these traits in common. We can say that, we're going to come up with a series of correlations as we build out more and more data. And then eventually we're going to be moving into building our own online platform with a really cool function. So, how in astrology or whatever, we may or may not believe in astrology, but it does a compatibility chart between you and another person. So it says like, how good are you guys in love? How good are you guys together in business? Well, Logos is going to be able to do that, but using the data of how people actually make decisions and answer the question. So it's not based on the stars, it's based on how you respond to the questions directly.
So you're going to need a bodyguard you're going to break up a few relationships. They're going to be like, well, they took the test and then they broke up with me. I'm coming for you, James.
Yeah. It's all right. This is the difficult task that innovators and pioneers have to just go along with.
Yeah. I remember hearing a story about Tony Robbins where I think when he first started doing his Date with Destiny events, and then all these relationships were like breaking and coming down. And then there was he's like, I need bodyguards. Like, I know I'm a big guy, but I need bodyguards just to make sure that no one comes to take it out on me.
Yeah. So we did a reading the other day for a couple with the guy was a private security for one of the world's wealthiest individuals. And it was like, it's an intense reading, when you're doing that stuff and you get these people, and it's definitely, it's awesome, but it can definitely be intense when you get that hard feedback, especially when we have like an ego around it. It can be hard to hear. So we try to soften it and make it land for people in a way that feels really supportive and not like going to be crushing.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. Good to hear. And so with that, when you say like that data, like how much data are you guys looking for to then like be able to make those correlations? Like, is it a number of tests or is it number of like what's the sort of target you guys are shooting for?
Yeah. So as you get bigger and bigger sample sizes, you can say things more powerfully and more certain. Right now, we're just working our way up to about 5,000 responses so that we can basically say with a lot of certainty, this is what the correlations are. Ultimately, when we're up in the hundreds of thousands, we'll have even more that we can do with like subset populations. This is the data nerd part, but I'm going to stop there. But yeah, about 5,000 is what we're working towards right now.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. I like the nerdy side of things. That's why I always ask the kind of more random side of the questions. That's awesome. And so look, as we get towards the end of our time here together, I always like to ask the same question every time, which is, what's the question that I didn't ask you guys that I should have? And I'm happy for you guys to have one of these each.
Where can you take the test?
Well, look, I was definitely going to ask you that, but you go with that. I'm feel like maybe the marketing side of the partnership here.
That's definitely not me. James is the voice of this, but I'm trying to think. Is there anywhere that feels incomplete with regards to it?
Yeah, I can't. There's nothing that comes to mind that's like jumping out to me. But
well, let me throw one to you then from me. What's like so people listening to this, right? And they're going to be like, cool, I feel like I want to take the test. What are the pros for someone who's a business owner, entrepreneur, like being able to understand these things? What's the big benefits for them of really diving in and understanding this?
So if you run a business, knowing with precision your actual traits and strengths tells you a lot. It tells you, number one, who you need to hire to support you. Because unless you're a solopreneur, like having a team is a part of the deal. So making sure your team is actually a correct fit with you. And then not just that, but understanding your team well enough so that they can be motivated to do what it is you want them to do. Because there are so many ways that we ascribe motivation and meaning to our reality that if you can understand that for each of your team members, you can speak to them in like their native tongue, right? And they may all speak English, but we all have a native tongue in terms of our emotions and the things that matter to us and the framework through which we think of ourselves in the world. So it's super useful. It's like cheat codes for knowing how to lead your team and who to you need on your team in the first place.
Awesome. I love that. Would you add anything to that, Jara?
No, I think that's all encompassing to what it really does for teams. I think, the right team, where your breakdowns are so you can set up your accountability on the things you do want to learn. And then for business partners, like you already mentioned, between us, like, okay, is this really, are we the right mesh for the goal that we're working towards? It's very clarifying. And how do you even work together? Because that's such an intimate relationship. Yeah.
Awesome. I love that. And now we'll ask the pressing question, Jara. Where can people take the test? Where do they actually find out about this test and go and take it if they're listening and they're like, actually, I do want to find out about myself and how I interact with people, whether it be personal relationships, business, or otherwise. Where's the best place for them to go?
So the website is welcometologos.com. And Logos is Logos.
Awesome. And is what about like on socials? Any platforms that are better than the others for people to go and connect with you guys?
LinkedIn is good.
They can come to our personal. Logos doesn't have its own thing yet. They would just have to come to our personal ones, I think. Or LinkedIn is up.
LinkedIn. Perfect. All right. We'll link that. So guys, wherever you are watching or listening to this, check the notes above or below. We'll have links to the website. We'll have links to LinkedIn so you guys can check out what these guys are up to. And of course, if you know someone who maybe has been struggling a little bit to identify what it is that they want to be doing, why things aren't working for them, and maybe show them how they can actually start making things actually work for them, identify their genius and what they can actually do to grow and improve in their lives and their businesses, please share this episode with them, get it out and amongst the people so that they can hear from James and Jara. And guys, again, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you making the time.
Thank you, Kim, so much.
It's been a pleasure.
You're a great host, by the way.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
It's been so much fun.
It's been great having you. Thanks, guys, and we'll see you soon.